Started real estate investing back in 2011, graduated from Western in London, Ontario. I got into a couple of single families in 2011, 2012, invested in the United States and Ohio. In 2015, I started going full at it, trying to do BRRRRs and, selling the ones I couldn't qualify on. Started a company to flip properties, built up a bit of a portfolio of student rentals of my own through, buying and adding large additions, building townhouses. And I've been doing that for the last few years, townhouses, single family homes, in the process of building out a 126 house subdivision right now, just starting on the models. More recently, from an investor standpoint, I've been selling off some of my student rentals, and actually I'm taking that money down to Florida where the dollar's going further, the numbers are working better, and it just seems to be a bit of a better fit.
We're releasing a video every single day in 2020. We're going to become the content kings of Canadian real estate.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we've got Andrew Hines back on the channel. It's been a while. Hey, Andrew, how's it going?
Matt, it's going well. How are you?
Good. So I honestly don't remember last time we chatted, but it's probably been at least a year. So I'd love to just hear kind of what's going on in your world today in 2021. Is still focused on the same sort of real estate investing? Are you pulling back, doubling down? What direction are you headed in?
Well, actually, I think we've talked on your other platforms. I know you've been on my podcast. I've been on your podcast a couple of times. I don't think I've ever been on your channel.
Oh, shit. Okay. Maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah. So this will be the first time for some people, but how much do you want me to give? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, let's go deep into it then if this is your first time.
Yeah. Okay. So I started real estate investing back in 2011, graduated from Western in London, Ontario. I saw students living in houses when I was a student, and I'm like, wow, I want to be on the other end of that, collecting the money. It took me a while to get into student housing because I didn't have the money for it. I didn't know how to manage it at first. But I got into a couple of single families in 2011, 2012, invested in the United States and Ohio, lost a whole bunch of money, got burned, learned all the things not to do, tried some development back in London, made the front page of the London Free Press as the big bad Toronto developer, even though I was living around the corner. And so I failed at that, just cleaning up messes after messes. And it got to this point where I was like, almost, okay, I'm out of real estate. Didn't want to continue for a while there. And then I managed to get things turned around because I saw my friend just crushing these student rental flips and BRRRRs, and he was making like $100,000 minimum. And I just said, okay, well, why am I not doing this? I need to figure it out. So I just kind of watched what he was doing, figured it out. And then in 2015, I started going full at it, trying to do BRRRRs and, selling the ones I couldn't qualify on. Started a company to flip properties, built up a bit of a portfolio of student rentals of my own through, buying and adding large additions on the backs of them, and, making them 5-bed, 5.5 bathroom, and then charging super premium rent because they would justify that. And then from there, I got asked to help other people build stuff because people saw that I was building stuff and it was going quickly. So I started getting into construction, which I never thought I would do, building townhouses. And I've been doing that for the last few years, townhouses, single family homes, in the process of building out a 126 house subdivision right now, just starting on the models. So it's kind of crazy the way things go. And more recently, from an investor standpoint, I've been selling off some of my student rentals, and actually I'm taking that money down to Florida where the dollar's going further, the numbers are working better, and it just seems to be a bit of a better fit. Plus it's warm, and it gave me an excuse to be down there for a while. So I was definitely enjoying myself. But I just tied up 5 lots. So I'm going to be building those over the next year or so.
Nice. And so like between all these different activities, where do you find yourself spending the bulk of your time, or is it evenly divided?
Yeah, the time thing has been a challenge. I'd say the biggest time suck is on the new construction stuff here in Ontario. It's not that I'm in the day-to-day, it's just in the higher level planning, decision making, especially when it comes to these, like I'm quarterbacking everybody, and that's kind of the GC's job. And it's not that I'm actually doing the work, but I have to be kind of a hub of information sometimes, which that takes up a bit of my bandwidth, I would say. But more recently, prospecting, networking, the 3 months I spent in Florida from start of February to start of May was extremely helpful. And it gave me an opportunity to just go to the local networking meetups and learn the investor community down there. And for me as an investor, I only want to deal with people who have a reputation in a community and have something to lose if they don't do, if they act anything but above board. And that was a big thing, because I'm trying to learn from past mistakes, because last time I went into the US, I got, in with people that didn't have much to lose. Yeah. And therefore I became the person that lost.
Yeah, it can be, there's so many different operators, right? And it can be really easy to fall in with like more of a fly by night, or someone that just kind of stitched together a sort of business model and they cross their fingers and hope the market will bail them out.
And there's so many people out there that are just so eager, like they want to get in, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but they kind of just abandon the warning signs because they want that cash flow. They heard, oh, you can make 500 a cash flow. That's amazing. I can't find that here. And it sounds too good to be true. And I think a lot of people, they just say, oh, I don't want to think that way, but you got to trust your gut. And that's one of the biggest things. Like, I'm almost 10 years as a real estate investor now, actually we're past 10 years now. And I've learned to trust my gut. That's the biggest thing. Anytime I don't trust my gut, that's when I get burned.
And kind of circling back, because I'm sure a lot of my audience is interested in the idea of like a subdivision, right? It sounds really cool. Yeah. It sounds like a big check the box moment. Do you mind breaking down, like, what does that actually, how does that come together? How did you get to that stage? And this wasn't kind of your first run at it either. So I'd love to just hear that framework, I guess, of how you find yourself today being able to execute on a project that size.
Well, I think that the biggest thing is just being able to recognize talent, like find people who have talent and delegate to them. So for me, like with the initial student housing, that's where it started, right? That was where the construction and the idea that I could do this came from. Like the development I tried was the first crack at it, and I failed miserably, but I learned a lot about hiring professionals, hiring engineering consultants, and what role they play. So I had some familiarity before I even got into these student rental BRRRRs. But then once I got into the student rental BRRRRs, I knew nothing about working with my hands. I didn't know how to renovate anything. So I was on site every day because I wasn't willing to be burned again. And I was going to watch people like a hawk, but I wasn't going to do the work. So I was just on my phone, bringing people in, firing them, bringing them in, firing them. And some of the experts that I eventually found were extremely educational to me. Like, I got to watch them work, got to understand the business. And I found one guy, he was like a really fantastic carpenter. And he knew what he was doing. He was a perfectionist to some degree with regards to some things. And I knew with him, okay, I can actually build something bigger here, because this guy could build houses, he could do anything, and he knows exactly start to finish how a construction project should go. So I leveraged his knowledge, learned what I needed to know, and then eventually I absorbed enough of what he knew that I could repeat it without him. And that's kind of how that went. Now, the development side of things, I started getting pulled into these larger townhouse development projects. And, I'm just the guy that like went out and incorporated a company when I got asked. Somebody's like, hey, could you help us build this? I'm like, well, I've never done that before, but yeah, I could do that. And so I went out and did that, and we got going. And then I started working with engineering consultants again, learning how municipal servicing goes in, learning about how roads are installed, and the process and procedure that goes into that, and how the city expects the work to be certified. So really, it's actually quite simple. Like, when you're servicing a subdivision, you hire an engineering consultant. They work for their own firm, and they certify all your work to the city. So if you're doing something start to finish, they'll help you tender it out. They'll help you, ensure that the quality is being done all the way through, and they'll equally represent you and your contractor start to finish. So it actually is super helpful. You just need to know the people. So really, this business, to me, and I'm sure your business is a lot the same, knowing the right experts to talk to, and knowing how to allow them to carry out what it is you want them to do. And now today, I have a site supervisor that does pretty well everything to do with the site. So I'm almost entirely uninvolved in day-to-day site activities. If somebody from site were to call me First off, I would be wondering how they got my number. But secondly, I would say, no, you need to call Rod. Rod's on site. He handles matters like this. And by removing myself from that, now I'm able to go a little bit higher and help out with the overall concept of this new project where it's like 126 houses and we're talking designs. We're going to allow customization for the sale. So I'm just contracted to help the build here, but it's just being that my time's been freed up a bit more, I'm able to help a little bit more on the bigger picture. And it's also allowed me to focus more on developing more investment opportunities for myself too.
Gotcha. Yeah, really appreciate you breaking that down for us. And I guess I've got two primary follow-up questions on that. And I'll maybe start off first with just, how do you decide when it's the right opportunity to figure it out along the way? And the reason I kind of ask the question this way is when you're talking about, someone gives you an opportunity and you decide, yep, I can figure this out. I'll go set up a corporation and do that. I see a lot of investors, sometimes they're too eager to want to jump into the first opportunity. So like the first piece of raw land they drive by, they're like, that's for sale. I'm going to buy it and I'll develop it and it'll be this great thing. And oftentimes, I guess I find people trying to shoehorn a property or a business model onto the other. So how do you go about making sure that you're not getting caught up in the emotion of the potential and that you're actually seeing, I guess, the real potential?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it really comes down to getting immersed, right? You or I just seeing a piece of land, if we had no background in this, we'd have no idea what goes in. We'd have no idea that you need to speak with the municipality, work with an urban planner if the zoning's not correct, find out if that land has a future intended use that would be conducive to what you're trying to do. Like sometimes a land is zoned commercial or zoned residential, but the city's long-term plan for that land is to be used as commercial. You've talked about this before, pushing your business downhill. You would never know any of that stuff unless you immersed yourself and got around people who talked about it. So I think that anyone who thinks they're ready when they're going in completely blind is probably just being naive and ignoring their gut. Their gut's probably telling them, "Oh, I'm nervous. I don't know about this one, but hey, I'll just try it out." I don't think that's the right move. I think the right move is to learn the nuts and bolts. You don't need to learn everything, but learn the key players that are involved and generally speaking what they do. So you could explain it in an elevator conversation with somebody. If you understand it that well, then if your gut is telling you, hey, I think I know enough of this. For me, in my experience, that's been enough. Now, that's not advice. Everybody's different. The right time is going to be different for everybody. But for me, say, in Florida, I went to, I guess 6. There was two events a month at these real estate meetups. And I went to pretty well all of them. I was networking with people in between, having phone calls, seeing places. It took me almost a full 3 months to be ready to pull the trigger and sign something. Like as eager as I was and just wanted to get going, and I have money like burning a hole in my pocket back home, making the wrong move is so painful. And I've spent years cleaning up messes I've created that I'm very, very careful to make sure that my gut is telling me yes. And when I heard the guy speak that I'm JVing with, when he came up to the front of the room and spoke at one of these events, it was just like a quick 2-minute, hey, this is my name, this is what I do, anybody interested, come talk to me. And as soon as he talked, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. Like I just had that immediate feeling, okay, yep, that's the right move for me right now. It doesn't mean it'll go perfect, doesn't mean there won't be hiccups, but I know how to position myself to protect my interests. I know how to evaluate the situation and mitigate my downside.
Yeah, and just kind of building upon that, I really see it. I was having a conversation with my team on Wednesday night, and we were discussing the importance of having fun or being engaged with the work. And so a lot of the people that I see initially wanting to get into development or are thinking about dabbling with it, the only reason that they want to get into that space is to make a bunch of money. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to make a bunch of money, but I think if that's your only motivation, what ends up happening is you're constantly looking for shortcuts. You're not willing to put in the work initially to do that due diligence to figure out whether it makes sense. And I guess if you don't mind just kind of building upon that, Andrew, do you find either way you're viewing this as I'm going to go into this, go to Florida, I'm going to learn whether this works or doesn't work. It's not, I'm going to learn to make this work, right? It's more, I'm going to figure this out and if it can be done.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And that was because I have my podcast and I'm always sharing, oh yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm very careful not to commit myself to something that I don't know for sure will work. And people who follow me know I'm about the numbers. The numbers need to work and I won't compromise. That's why I'm not buying in Ontario right now. I know you can go north. I didn't really want to go north. So for me, I won't compromise. So I'm very careful to say I'm looking to see if I can make this work. And I was quite honest about it and said, you know what, these numbers aren't the best, but there's a lot of intangibles I like here. I'm bullish on the values down here. That was kind of my thinking, and it's not perfect, but I found a scenario with what I've told you here. I can kind of burr these new construction deals and be in for nothing, and they'll still cash flow. And while it might not be $1,000 a month, there are creative ways that I could increase that. And for me, the biggest thing is I know that holding real estate will generate my wealth, but I want to make sure that I'm never going to regret owning that property because it's costing me $300 a month. I don't want leeches. I want little cash contributors to my life. Even if it's small, it's got to be a contributor.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you also mentioned that, finding talent and being able to deploy that talent as a major aspect or maybe competitive advantage of what you do right now, or a big focus. For a lot of beginning investors, it's really hard to make that investment in talent. Like they're constantly trying to cut corners, go on Kijiji, find the $15, $20 an hour person. How do you approach that? Is there any little mental hacks or tricks that you could recommend to the audience on getting comfortable paying good people good wages?
I haven't yet figured the secret out to that one. Matt, you could probably tell me better. I think that early on, when it came to like hiring good carpenters, the easiest decision was, well, I don't know anything about this. Like, I can't do this. And there were breaking points. Initially, I thought I could hire the cheap guys. I think we all start that way.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, wow, that was stupid. So that my first project, I hired $16, $17 an hour guys. And that's what I got. I got what I paid for. Eventually got a guy for a steal at like $20 an hour. He should have been 30, but circumstance allowed it. Now, he's worth 50, in the current market, $60 an hour. And, that's debatable, but I think so. And what it came to was I saw how much money there was to be made in a project. Once I realized that even paying this guy, and I was forced to hire him out of just stress and anxiety and fear of just screwing everything up. By the end of the project, when I still made money and I had him, I'm just like, okay, well, I don't want to sleep on drywall 5 nights a week and like live in these flips that I do, or these burr projects. I'd like to have a life and be profitable. And it forced me, and it showed me, yes, like I will never be my site manager again. I made that decision for myself. So that one became easy because I made this like statement to myself, I will never be a site supervisor ever again. But with the admin side, that's harder, just because it's so personal, so close to me. And there's a lot of things that are, like passwords and, financial stuff that I don't necessarily want to give out. So that makes it a little harder for me to delegate. But anything like, urban planning, accounting, lawyers, when I got into the US stuff, it forced me to have a really good accountant. So I just stuck with that. And that's, fantastic decision. It makes things really simple. So I think a lot of things have been added into my business from necessity. I just realized like I hit a breaking point. I'm like, I have to hire this out. I would love to be able to skip that breaking point step and go straight to hire, but it seems to be my pattern. So if you've got any tricks, you let me know, Matt.
Yeah, I don't have a silver bullet for anyone, but I do think one mental hack that I know has helped me as we've been scaling our different businesses is you're not committing to a year's salary, right? And I think far too often people look at like $50 an hour. If he works 2,000 hours a year, that's $100,000. Oh my God, I'm going to pay a contractor $100,000 to work for me full time. It's still a lot of money, but if you divide it, that's only, $8,300 a month. And that actually becomes much more manageable, I think, for us to figure out, okay, well, can I build a business that will make me at least $8,300 or more in profit before I pay this person, right? And will they actually add a compounding factor where I can either do more projects, making more money, or we can increase margins by taking on different types of projects or work. But I think the real key is just not having the sticker shock, because it's so easy to have that sticker shock and be like, oh, well, it'd be so much smarter for me to go find 2 guys at 50,000. Think about 2 guys. But in fact, the one dude worth 100,000 may need almost no management. The two guys, you may have to show up at 8 a.m. every morning to make sure they're not drunk on the job site.
Right. Yeah. I guess the only challenge with the sticker price thing is 1 month probably isn't enough with a lot of people to know if they're going to be a fit. I mean, with some, you're going to know if they're a fit within the first 2 days, but hopefully your interview process is good enough that you don't hire those ones. So yeah, I guess what would you say, like on average, you need to know if somebody's a fit for you?
For us, we go through a weird vetting process. So first of all, it depends on which business you're applying for. But if you're applying for kind of one of my inner teams, essentially every single person has to do like selfie video before we're even going to get on an in-person interview call. We'll probably do a handful of in-person interview calls. And we do our, again, this isn't like necessarily me interviewing a contractor. We've approached this in a different way, but for inner team members, it's going to be very conversational, and we're really just going to kind of ebb and flow and explore the conversation rather than having like, tell me your greatest weakness and then having them regurgitate something that's not really going to help either of us. So we actually spend a decent amount of the time talking during the interview, really kind of explaining what our business is about and kind of like trying to force them to make a decision. When I'm in a conversation, often in the hiring process, I almost talk as if you've already got the job, and then like framing it in such a way of like, will you enjoy doing this? Will you like doing this? What do you think about this sort of concept? We've got a book club. Is that something that you think is cool or lame? And just kind of exploring those things will often allow us to understand if they're a cultural fit. Because for me, we talk about this with our wholesaling team all the time, but if you don't have that hunger, that spark, that drive, that's the only thing I can't teach you. I literally believe I can almost teach you everything else. But if you don't have that internal locus of control, that identity that you're influencing the world, not that the world's purely influencing you, it's going to be a real uphill battle for you to coexist in our ecosystem. So I know that, and that's kind of how we take in that direction. But for me, when we decided to hire, like at the start of 2020, we decided we were just done dealing with like random crews for our apartment renovations and stuff like that. It was just getting to be too much. So I decided we're going to hire, one contractor to rule them all as our GC that would build out a crew and stuff like that. And the way we explored that entire conversation was like, this is what we want. What do you want? And we're just going to build a system that works right. But in that case, I was choosing from my network. So again, I love picking people from my network if possible first, rather than just going out to the general world, just because, again, like you mentioned, there's a certain credibility, reputation factor there often.
Oh yeah. And then if they're bought in, right? If they buy into what you do, then there's, if they're following you, there's a good chance they're more of a cultural fit, especially, right? If they're in your network. I know like at Matt Pichet's hiring always off of his Instagram. Well, if they follow him, they obviously resonate. There's a huge value in that. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's the next hurdle. As I scale up more, I'll most likely be hiring an admin to work just full time and kind of be mini me or second me, and then that'll just allow me more and more time to think and more time to do bigger things. Yeah,
I think that stuff's life changing for me. That was one of the best hires. Like, I don't read any of my own emails. I don't schedule anything in my own calendar. All that stuff is done by Lara, and it like literally allows me to be more productive, which is huge.
That sounds glorious, man.
I highly recommend it. So looking towards the future, I think you mentioned you've been in real estate now for over 10 years. I've been in real estate for over 10 years. There comes a certain point where you maybe hit critical mass, a certain tipping point, you hit a certain plateau where all of a sudden you realize there's probably actually more opportunities than you've got time or energy. So how do you focus, Andrew, on which ones to focus on? And like, is it part of a bigger plan? Like, is there a 5, 10, 15 year master plan here? And this choice to go into Florida slots in there? Or was this just, hey, there's a chance to make more money here than there is in Ontario right now?
Well, it's bigger picture for me. Like I think of anything that I'm dependent on as being a weakness. And so if I were dependent on a job, I would consider that a weakness. If I'm dependent on one customer, I consider that a weakness. And my goal is really to just root out all weakness and all dependency. So diversifying outside of Canada was a strategic thing for me. Wanted to have a little bit more of a political hedge, because we don't have to get into politics, but I don't agree with what's happening right now. And I think that it's smart as an investor to have money on both sides of the border and maybe in a few different countries, just in case certain things go a certain way you don't like. And so that was, a big part of this move. But, in terms of picking opportunities, I've been buried for a little while in terms of just feeling like I had no more capacity to even consider. And that's been getting better. For sure it has, as I've been able to delegate more. So now this is where I'm actually starting to see more opportunities, but I'm very, very careful to listen to my gut. That's the biggest thing. Like, would I like doing this? I'm not interested in being busy for the sake of being busy. I don't need to take on any one income earning activity. I've created some freedom in my life by being frugal to some degree, but having a few different sources of income, and it's helped me greatly. And what I'm just looking to do is to just further differentiate that, further diversify the sources of income so that no one person or business or entity holds power over me in terms of the ability to put me into a fight or flight response and make me fear like I won't be able to buy dinner or won't be able to put food on the table, that kind of thing. So really it's just about continuously growing, learning along the way, finding a way to do things smarter. It's not like I'm saying I need to be worth, $1 billion or anything like that. Like, to me, it's all, how much can I enjoy life with my family? How much can I enjoy my experiences? And of course, income's a huge part of that. Just an ultimate freedom to wake up every single day and do whatever the heck it is I want to do. That's always what I'm working towards. So whatever will get me there, I'm going to add that into the mix.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate you breaking that down. And then on like the smaller time scales, do you set like quarterly, yearly goals? And if so, what does that process look like?
I don't always, but I mean, for this one, I've got the goal of getting at least 3 of these builds done this year, which will be difficult. I'm going to have the other stuff going back home with the new construction ones. Not really setting any goals around that. Like those are just kind of the things. So micro scale, yeah, I do set some micro goals. I probably should do more. That would probably make me more effective. But that's kind of how I've been proceeding so far.
Awesome. Yeah. Appreciate you breaking that down. And any content that you're currently consuming, any books or anything you'd recommend that right now you're really just vibing with?
Good question. I tend to keep up on a mix of a lot of different things. The big thing with doing the podcast content is I'm always talking to investors. So I don't find that I'm taking in as much real estate content now because I've been doing this for so long. So I've been studying some stuff. I've been learning a little bit about the stock hacking stuff that everybody seems to be doing. So just kind of learning and figuring out what the best thing is. So as far as specifics, I guess, there's not a whole ton that I would share at the moment, but I mean, I follow like guys that you follow. Like, I don't know if you follow Peter Schiff at all. I listen to some of his stuff. It really just depends on the day. Some conservative politics podcasts, things like that.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah, Peter Schiff is always interesting to listen to, if nothing else.
A little extreme sometimes.
Yeah, but it's fun to see him and the Bitcoin universe go back and forth at each other. So I enjoy watching from the sidelines.
Yeah, I'm not... don't worry about that, by the way, it'll go away. I'm not big on Bitcoin, right? Like we've both studied economics. Like I very much prefer tangible assets. So it's funny. Yeah. It's funny getting into these discussions with people. I'm like, I don't deny you can make money. It just doesn't fit my fundamentals.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate you making the time just to kind of jump on. I can't believe this was the first time that I had you on, but I guess maybe it's just been on a couple podcasts that we've chatted before, probably on Fire and stuff like that. But
yeah, I think we've done on Fire 2 or 3 times, and you've been on my podcast, which we'll have to do again. Just see what you're up to and get the full scoop. So I'll maybe fire an email back. We can set that up if you're open to it.
For sure. And we'll throw a link to all of Andrew's social media platforms and podcasts in the video description down below. But if you just want to give people kind of a quick insight to what your podcast is all about, Andrew.
Yeah, so it's everything real estate investing and wealth creation, really real estate focused though. So I haven't really veered too much off of that. We might have the odd guest that, is doing 50-50 something else. So that's why this whole stock hacking thing keeps coming up. I keep hearing real estate investors doing it, but just nuts and bolts, start to finish. Like people constantly say if they've listened right from the beginning that it kind of gave them the edge. It helped them, jump into real estate investing when they didn't know what they were doing. So yeah, if anyone's interested in that, I mean, of course they can get that on your channel too. But if they're driving in their car and they want to listen to the audio version, they can grab it on mine.
Awesome. Well, again, appreciate it, Andrew, and we'll throw links in the video description down below.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me on.